John Rowinski trembled from the cold. His toes turned to stone and limbs barely moved. Yet he was doing what he loved to do more than anything else in the world. The 16-year-old sat on a deer stand during the Christmas holidays. His deer stand sat on the side of a steep ridge filled with white oaks and beech trees. The below-freezing temperatures made it hard to remain still. Though the temperatures rarely fell to the mid-teens in South Louisiana, this cold front was real. Since an hour before daylight, John shuddered. He hadn't seen a single deer. They must be cold too, he thought. 3 hours after the sun rose above the horizon, the temperature abated. Small pockets of frozen leaves began to melt. John watched the crystalline reflection of one when he heard the sound. It was one he'd heard many times before, a deer walking down the draw between the ridges. The small buck sported a basket rack with only 3 tines called points on each side. It headed toward the marsh that adjoined the mighty Mississippi River. Almost impenetrable, the boggy thicket provided sanctuary for the deer in the area during daylight hours. The 6-point buck elated John as much as the famous 30-point buck of song. He'd killed a few does and 1 spike in his hunting career, but he'd never killed a rack buck. When the 2-year-old came into view, John's heart raced. It beat so fast he forgot all about the cold. Taking his time and making no sudden movements, John raised the rifle and nestled it to his shoulder. His hands shook so badly the teen had trouble keeping the crosshairs steady. His aim meandered up and down, right and left, sometimes on the intended target and sometimes not. John closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. He let it out slowly. When he opened his eyes, his hands grew steadier. The crosshair settled on a spot on the buck just behind the front shoulder. Just as he pulled the trigger, the buck sensed danger and leaped forward. John was told by his father, Butch, to stay on the stand no matter the circumstances. He had a pea jar for emergencies, but wasn't to climb down the ladder. But as the smoke cleared the muzzleloader, John couldn't stand the anticipation. The .50 caliber ball was as deadly as any modern ammunition if it hit the right spot. From his viewpoint on the stand, John couldn't see the deer. He tried to recall the shot. The little buck had lunged forward. The teen tried to adjust, but wasn't sure he'd compensated enough for the movement. After 10 minutes, John could stand it no more. He descended the wooden steps and ran down the side of the ridge to the bottom of the draw. No deer in sight, not a single hair. Dejected, John's shoulders slumped. He saw a track in the soft mud, bent down to take a better look, and his heart pounded again. A few inches in front of the track, he found a drop of blood. John had hit the buck. The teen looked up at the stand where he was supposed to be. He knew his dad would be upset he hadn't obeyed the given instructions. But if it meant he'd killed a deer, John knew his dad wouldn't stay angry. He had a decision to make. He could climb back into the stand and act as if he never left it. He could remain at the bottom of the draw, or he could find the deer he'd dreamed about for years. After 2 minutes of internal struggles, John made up his mind. He took a nervous step down the draw toward the marsh. He wanted to find his deer. He couldn't wait for the other hunters.